Today I have for you 60 Saints for Girls by Joan Wyndham, the story of Saints Martha and Sarah. Once upon a time, there was a woman called Martha, and she had a sister called Mary and a brother called Lazarus. I am not going to tell you about the things that happened to them that you could read for yourself in the New Testament, but I shall tell you a story about what happened a good deal later. You do remember, don't you, that this Martha was the busy housekeeping one of the two sisters and that our Lord raised their brother Lazarus from the dead? Well now, sometime after the resurrection of our Lord, the story is that Martha and her sister Mary and their brother Lazarus and a few other Christians left Palestine in a ship. They had all been teaching about Christianity, which was a new thing, and already some people were trying to get rid of the Christians. So these few people sailed away from Palestine and thought they would go somewhere quite different and start a patch of Christianity there. And when it spread a bit, they would move on and do the same thing somewhere else. The ship they sailed on was going first to Marseille in France, and the Christians thought that they would land there and let the ship go on without them, and so they did. As soon as they had found somewhere to live, they started preaching and teaching. Martha and Mary and Lazarus and their maid Sarah stayed in Marseille, but all the others moved on in little clumps in different directions. Martha used to tell the French people a lot of little family things, as well as Christian teaching. She told them the sorts of things she used to cook for our Lord when he stayed in their house, and the things he said and what colors he liked best to wear. She told them, of course, all about her brother Lazarus, and how once he was dead for 3 whole days. After a time, when they found that people liked their stories and were kind to them, they separated and went different ways so as to spread Christianity more quickly. Martha went to teach the people who lived between Arles and Avignon. You remember the town that has a bridge that people dance on? That's a fun song. One day, she saw crowds of people running up the road to her cottage, and she went out to see what it was all about. "What is happening?" she asked the first people who came up her garden path. "It's the dragon," they panted, and they looked behind them with frightened faces. "The dragon?" asked Martha. She'd always believed there was no such animal. "It lives along the river," said the people, "and it has killed a lot of our sheep and cows before now, but today it has been killing people." "How very sad," said Martha. "But why do you come and tell me about it? I should have thought it would have been better to tell the police or the soldiers or someone." "Yes, perhaps," said a man who was standing in front of the crowd, "but we had an idea." "What idea did you have?" asked Martha. "Well," said the man, "we thought it might be a good way for you to prove that Christianity is true. If your God has any power, let him show it to us now. Come with us, Martha, and see if your God will save us from the dragon." "Let me see now," said Martha. "Of course, God will save you if you believe that he will, because nothing is impossible for him. But he always said that you must have faith. Have you got some faith?" The people said that of course they had, or they wouldn't have come to ask her for help. So Martha, who had a kind heart, said she would go with them straight away. She thought she wouldn't tell them just yet that their faith wasn't exactly the kind she had meant. So Martha and the people went along the banks of the river Rhone until they came to the flat, gravelly part where the dragon lived. When she was in the middle of this flat part, she knelt down, and so did everyone else. "What shall I do now?" said Martha to God. "You know I'm terrified of dragons." "It isn't a real dragon," said God very quietly to Martha. "Real dragons aren't big enough to eat cows and people and things. This is the devil pretending to be a dragon to frighten all the pagans away from here so that you will have nobody to teach about me." "Thank you very much for telling me," said Martha very quietly to God. "Shall I make the sign of the cross?" "Yes," said God. So Martha made a big sign of the cross and walked up to the dragon, who stood quite still and shivered with fright at the sign of God. It was so frightened that it couldn't move at all, although it did try to open its mouth at Martha. Martha took off her sash and put it round the dragon's neck, and then she called to the people to come and kill it quickly before it began to move again, and they did. Then everybody cheered and said that Martha had most certainly proved that Christianity was true, and they all became Christians that very day. Martha had a lot of work to teach them all they needed to know and believe, but she managed it all right in time. Later on, a big city was built at that very place where the dragon lived, and it is called Tarascon because Tarasque is the French word for dragon. We might have called it Dragontown or Dragonville or something. Of course, St. Martha is the patron saint of that city. St. Martha's special day is July 29th, and although there are 14 or 15 other St. Marthas, this was the first one. As well as being patron saint of Tarascon, she is the patron saint of housewives. And I know a hospital in London where the housekeeping sister is always called Sister Martha, even if her name is Rose or Helen or something. There's another saint in this story. Do you remember Martha's maid called Sarah? Well, she is really Saint Sarah, and she is the patron saint of gypsies, but I can't find out why. When I do find out, I will write you a story about her. I just mentioned this so that all the Sarahs won't feel left out. The end.